Good episode of SmackDown. I thought it was good for the setup for War Games, but it really begs the question of like the big question for this show is what the hell is WWE doing with War Games? Why has War Games become the new equivalent of Hell in a Cell? Like it's basically it's that time of the year. You got to do it. So here's how we're gonna do it this year. It really stands out how bad the booking and the setup for the women's war games has been when you have a years long story in the men's war games matchup. This bloodline versus bloodline match, people have been talking about it for a full year since the Usos and Solo and Roman were doing battle at Money in the Bank last year. People were talking about, oh, the big one's it's going to be Bloodline versus Bloodline. It's going to be, the people thought Rock's Bloodline versus Roman's Bloodline. And now we got Roman's Bloodline versus Solo's Bloodline. And this is what it's been building up to. And it might not be the end of the Bloodline story, but it's a big moment, a big matchup for the Bloodline story. And then you have the woman over here who just haphazardly put together. You have Io Sky, who was feuding with Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill over the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships like 2 weeks ago. You got Io and Bianca. Io cashed in Money in the Bank on her, and the last two War Games was Damage Control versus Bianca Belair, and you haven't built up to this being a big moment with her teaming with Io Sky in any way. You got the whole Bailey and Bianca thing that they set up back in like April and never followed up on it. And now they're bringing it up with them having a little bit of tension every time they see each other backstage. So that doesn't make too much sense either. Then I'm not even going to get into what the spoilers for Monday Night Raw on Monday, who else destroyed that team, because it's just like, God damn, you just rushed everything. You're rushing people back. This is ridiculous. I don't know what's going on right now. And then on the heel side, you got Liv Morgan and Nia Jax, who had that awful match at Crown Jewel, been feuding for the past month, and now they're all good. They're on the same team. This women's division, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Miss Krssi Love. I think that was the one you missed with me, Top Guy JJ, and True Jaw Josh. With Liv and Nia as the two champions, and them having fairly, I think we can all agree, fairly stale or routine or formulaic kind of acts to them. The next title match is going to have Tiffany Stratton come out and interfere and either cash in Money in the Bank or help Nia get the win. Every Morgan matchup, Dominic Mysterio is going to cause a distraction or Raquel's going to interfere, and that's how Liv's going to win. It's very formulated with both women. So when you have the women's division like that, and then you shoehorn this whole women's war games, it really makes it stand out even more, all the flaws for both title pictures on Raw and SmackDown.
It's a headache. It's unfortunate that both, you knew you had this pay-per-view. You guys had this scheduled for how long? And now we're just getting everything and throwing all our ducks in one basket, and we're just going to pick all of them out. And it's a sad case. It's a sad case where now everyone is just okay, yeah, we're just getting ready for something that's in a week and a half, and now we just have to just throw them together. And and you can tell it's so rushed because nothing makes sense, especially for the women. You just had these two girls fight at the Saudi show, and hold on.
But yeah, and no, it's just
had them fight at the Saudi show, and which was terrible. And now you have them now teammating and attacking people for each other in the backs, and it's just the whole thing is just dumb.
It just very feels like, okay, these are the heel women, these are the babyface women. Let's figure out a way to get them into the matchup. And War Games shouldn't feel like that. Like the War Games that even with NXT, when we knew it was every year, you had Undisputed Era there, so it would just be who against the Undisputed Era, and people were fine and were eating it up for years over in NXT. For years. And you kind of had that with Damage Control the last 2 years, but they lost both of them. So they didn't even, they weren't even that good at War Games. And now they're going to be teaming up with Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill and Naomi or anyone else who joins up with this team. I want to go back to like the war games of like the dangerous alliances of the NWO, of the Four Horsemen. Like it's okay to you built out the whole WWE where everyone's in a faction, everyone's in a group, everyone has friends. But like, how did you come up into a situation where all of this feels haphazardly thrown together? You've been building the whole Nia and Tiffany Stratton tag team for a while. You had Raquel Rodriguez come back at Bad Blood, but you never gave them any reason to come together, those two teams. And now when you're just a couple of weeks from War Games and them kind of working together, doesn't make too much sense. It just feels very rushed. Josh, what do you think about this whole women's War Games setup that we saw on both SmackDown last night and Raw on Monday?
I mean, it's trash. There's not much else to say about that. It's trash.
But do you think War Games is becoming the new Hell in a Cell pay-per-view?
Yeah. It just feels they kind of feel like it's like, all right, we have this event coming up, we have to do something, right? Instead of just putting the hottest angle, right, for the match itself. And I think that that's part of the problem too. Just don't do it because you think you have to do it. Honestly, I'm not a fan of like these kind of things, like where you just throw something in because you feel like you need to have it, right? I'm all for the women getting more opportunities, but if the opportunity is like this, then I don't want to see it. Like if it's not good, just don't do it. That's just how I feel about it. It's just,
it's the forgotten pay-per-view. Like Survivor Series was always the forgotten pay-per-view.
Yeah,
just saying.
And it's just
now that they've changed it over. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, now they've that was the forgotten pay-per-view, and now they put it as War Games Survivor Series, and it's still the forgotten pay-per-view. So no one gives a shit about it.
Right? It's kind of like when I don't want to use this comparison, but it's like when AEW does Blood and Guts, right? People are saying like, oh, the women need one though. Like, why haven't you got one for the women? There's no significant story that's going to make sense for the women to do it. And I just don't want them to do a situation where they throw it in because they feel like they have to do it because they, it's just, when you do it like that, I think it's more like, takes away a lot more than anything. And then also like the two teams that you're using, like all like how trying to get all together, it's all over the place. So it's kind of just like, why should I be interested? And now it's like, is the match even going to be good? And all the people that you have in the match, it's like, I know some would do well, some could, they could do things, but overall, it's just like, there's no real investment for me that is like, oh my God, like I really need to see this match. This is probably a match I could just walk away from and then catch up on later. Like, and it sucks to say that because I don't want to say that about like about the women, but it's not interesting.
I just wish they would have done a 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series matchup. I gotta agree with all.
I would have been fine with that. I would have been for the women.
For the women, yes.
But the War Game stipulation does not need it for this. You're kind of convoluting. You're kind of diluting the whole War Game stipulation by just saying, "Hey, all of these women have been fighting for like 2 weeks. Let's put them in a War Games matchup." That's what it feels. And it feels very shoehorned, haphazardly put together, and just poorly conceived.
Yeah, and then what they should do with War Games, they should kind of treat it like what they converted Hell in a Cell to be now, where it's like, all right, if it's really needed, just do this. Now, when you kind of make it its own pay-per-view, you kind of handicap that shit too, because now you're expecting like, oh, all right, we're gonna have two teams for each side, of men's and women's, participate in War Games. So how they're gonna get there, and then you're probably never gonna get like two strong, significant storylines for them to get there. It's just it's kind of hard to just do that alone, right? With all the bloodline stuff, right? Even the stuff that I've been saying, like, yeah, it's predictable, right? Like I've been saying it's predictable. Like we kind of saw this coming because we've been saying this for months. Like, oh yeah, this is what they're gonna do.
Yeah, we've been saying this since the beginning of the year.
But at least there was like still some kind of investment. Like there was still an investment that people still wanted to see it because it's another part of the storyline that's, that once they get there, then they're on the road to, to WrestleMania, right? Because they build up from Royal Rumble to WrestleMania. So at least at least with that, like there's like a lot of there's some investment there. There's a storyline there, and how they got there. When you do shit like this, it's like it's kind of just hard for me to take it serious and to be invested. And like even the way they do War Games matches, like it's not as violent, so that's already a hard sell alone. So now it's like you're throwing this in, and it's probably just gonna be like, Io's probably gonna do the same thing that she always does in the War Games
every
match,
single time. Like she got the damn trash can and she's gonna go off the top.
And
oh
I
my
love,
god! Like if we and that's what it's been like 4 years in a row now. Like I'm over it.
And
I love Io. It started in NXT.
Yeah. You're right. It's been in NXT.
And I love Io, but it's like, do I want to see that shit again? No, I don't want to see it again because I already seen it.
Same girls
and it's like if you're not
like 6 years.
really doing nothing that's like it's not like. And I feel like that's why she was put in the match too, because they're like, oh yeah, since you jumped off the cage how many times already, let's just do it again. Like that's how it kind of feels like too. But
we got this great idea.
That alone to me,
we want you to be in a trash can and jump off the cage, right? That's a new idea, right? Great idea. Thank you. That's what they tell her every year.
All right, let's put thumbtacks on the trash can this time.
Oh my god!
Like it's like, you know what I mean? It's like I don't know. It's I'm not. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, the women, whoever's in it, hopefully they do well. Hopefully somebody shows out and it does something for them, right? I think that's all I could really ask for. Like, hey, if somebody does something crazy and they stick out and it benefits them going forward, by all means. But it's just the way they went, the way they got there with this. I'm like, guys didn't have to do War Games. You could have just kept it something. You could have done something else, 5-on-5, or just not do it at all. Like I would have been just fine with that.
And what do you think about the whole 5-on-5 stipulation? Because that's been a big talking point of the 5-on-5 stipulation for the men's War Games matchup. When I honestly thought it should be 4-on-4. We've had 4-on-4 War Games matches even back in like WCW, back in like 1997. That was a 4-on-4. It was I think it was the Four Horsemen versus the NWO on that one. But yeah, like you've had 4-on-4 War Games, you've had 3-on-3 War Games. Why couldn't you just do it 4-on-4? Why are you adding a whole different other feud? Because this is one spoiler I'll just give to y'all. Because you saw SmackDown last night, you see Bronson Reed's on the new Bloodline. I'll give you one guess who's on Team OG Bloodline. It's the guy Bronson Reed is feuding with. It's probably Seth freaking Rollins. That's what it is. It's probably Seth. It feels like you're adding a whole different other feud into War Games instead of the one we should be focused on, which is New Bloodline versus OG Bloodline. And yes, it can spawn off to Bronson Reed versus one of the OG Bloodline members, but it does kind of convolute the main issue here, which is the OG versus the new.
Yeah, and what I say to that is, for one, I'm glad I'm not the only one that feels that way, because I thought it should have been 4-on-4. Just keep it this main story. That's what I thought.
Keep the main players. You don't need actors. They don't need.
And then I saw people saying like, oh, like it makes sense for Bronson Reed because he's Samoan and
he blends well with them, but he don't need to be.
Like, who gives a fuck? It's like, for me, it's like, who gives a fuck? It's like, why is that being thrown in? Like, I don't want to see that shit. Have Seth and Bronson Reed do some other shit. They don't need to be in this match. Like, they don't need to be just because they have a feud. They have a feud on its own that I think is pretty good and could get to places. Doesn't need this fucking match for that. Because why? Because they're not the ones that are gonna be taking the pin. Nobody. I mean, whoever like loses, it's not gonna be one of them. It's right, because to me, like, even if Reed loses, right? Say like if Reed gets the, like, he's the one that takes the pin, right? That's not doing him favors at all. When he's already a guy that needs wins, like he already needs wins, and you're doing something like this, And again, I think people just look, and then this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where there's things to criticize WWE about, but because people are getting what they want, or they get like their favorites in something, they just not gonna really criticize it because they're getting what they want, right?
Mhm.
People want to
Yeah.
see Bronson Reed get his moment. People want to see Bronson Reed, do bigger things, which is, I think it's very fair. I think the
He's
guy
great, yeah.
has put in the
But
work, and I think
Mhm.
he has put in the work. But I want him to be in a situation where it not only makes sense, but it's like not thrown in, and they're trying to sell this whole thing like, oh, he's this and that. But I'm like, guys, you legit try to say that this man is a draw. He sells tickets, and yet you had him lose. And you had him lose not two big feuds, but you had him lose two big matches already. And it's like, how can you sell me on a loser? Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
part of the problem too. And, that's part of the problem too, no matter what. Like, yeah, he's been killing it, but you got to do more than that. Like, you want him to be presentable. He can't be taking these big losses in these big matches. And something like this, they thrown it in. It's just, I don't know. It's like they could have just stood with 4-on-4, and that would have been as good. And then guess what? Those guys would have gotten more time because it's 4-on-4. You're not really, like, because you know how you do it, like when they in the ring and then one person comes out, I mean, hey, benefits Roman. He gets to work less again in a War Games match. Last time he only worked like 10 minutes. So it benefits him.
I
But
wonder if
it's
he gets
just
his chair again to sit in the cage with the chair.
he probably does it because, like, oh, wait, that's not heel. I mean, that's not babyface. You got to stand up, man. You got to stay standing up, and you got to want to be in there.
We see Call Me Mr. Bonda. He says, "Where you at, Hikaleo or Tala Tonga?" I thought we could have seen him last night. You bring him in as the fifth competitor.
I thought that would have been the perfect fit.
I thought that would have been the perfect person to be in as the fifth member, but no. You bring in somebody else that don't have anything to do.
I guess they got something planned for him. I guess they got something planned for him, and knowing like the Triple H spectrum, we're probably not seeing him until January. I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If he's not here for War Games, then yeah, we're not seeing him till 2025. They kept him on ice for 6 months. 6 months at that point. If he's not showing up until January. We got Jamie Williams who asks, when The Rock coming back? I've heard people kind of speculate that The Rock could come back for War Games. He's obviously not going to be the fifth member of Team New Bloodline now after last night's SmackDown, but I could see a situation where The Rock like cost the OG Bloodline the matchup. That's something
for like
that
a minute because you had 2 movies that's coming out like within the next like 2 weeks. So he'll be there for a short period of time and he's going right back.
Yeah. And which the one this weekend is not doing very well, unfortunately.
Santa Claus one,
Did not expect Red One to do well. Sorry, Rock.
Moana's gonna be one that just goes crazy because that come out next week. So
yeah, that will break some record at the box office. We do have a super chat donation here from Chuck Berries. Thank you so much, Chuck Berries, for sure. He says, "I'm at the point where I'd rather see the Final Testament versus Wyatt Six in War Games than the women." I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's more of an established faction versus faction feud and story than the women's basically the Franken War Games, where they're just putting multiple different feuds into one matchup. And why does the women's War Games always like that in NXT? It was really the main roster was the exception to the rule with WWE, because I felt like a lot of the women's War Games in NXT were these Franken teams that were put together off of like multiple different feuds. Then 2.0 came around, they had Toxic Attraction, and they built the women's War Games around them. That made sense. You know, like I said, in most of the NXT for the men's, they built it around Undisputed Era, but with WWE main roster since 2022, the women's War Games has always been centered around Damage Control. Yeah. And you can add 1 or 2 people to Damage Control to make it a 5-on-5 in situations like that, but it worked. And now, because we don't have that same Damage Control team, you know, Asuka being out, Dakota just coming back this week, they basically decided, hey, we're just gonna put these things into a blender, we're gonna turn them around, and we're just gonna do it now. We didn't plan ahead. You got months and months of storyline building up to the men's War Games and 2 weeks of storylines for the women.
So who's going to be on the women's team? You have Io, Jade, Bianca, Naomi, and Bailey.
So basically, Damage Control and the tag team champions. It's basically Damage Control and the tag team champions. And then the other side, who is it again? See, like it's, that's where I'm confused.
Liv, Tiffany Stratton, Nia Jax, Raquel Rodriguez, and I would suspect after last night it would be Candice LeRae. She's someone who has War Games experience, and she's now involved.
And that makes it even worse that you have like the two, like you had the women who had the worst match, Crown Jewel, and all the fuckery that they involved with. Like, oh yeah, they're gonna be in one team. Like, oh. It's like, why? It's like, why? Like, oh,
hey, everyone needs a War Games. So, what do you guys think? Do you agree with WWE's? Let's see what the chat thinks. What do you guys think? Do you think WWE's making the right decision by doing this women's War Games? Or are they convoluting the stipulation? Let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comments down below. I did see a comment here I wanted to see. Oh, well, we have a Power Driver Finisher who says, I just feel on the men's side, it's a reason both teams are wrestling. But I think that the difference of it being that they're doing it so that it progresses the women's stories with the matchup. I think you have that in reverse. Actually,
it's backwards. It's backwards.
The women's side is the one that's just both teams. It's a reason for both teams to wrestle. With the men, it's actually going to be something that progresses the bloodline storyline, regardless of the result. We're going to see a shift, or it's going to go in a different direction coming out of War Games, and it's going to be something that we have to follow along with. I don't think that this women's War Games will have any progression on any of the women's stories. I think they will be exactly the same after War Games.
Definitely
and for me, it's like, regardless of what I said about like how we got there with like Sammy joining, and I was like, that's pretty predictable. Me saying that's predictable isn't me saying that it's bad. It's just saying like, all right, we're getting there. Let's see what they do, right? That's all I was saying. But I mean, like, again, this has been a story that we've kind of said since last year. Like it was projected, and then this year it was kind of more of like, all right, we're getting close, so the OG bloodline's gonna get back together. And then they did, and it's happening. But again, like, that's a story, like that's a storyline that they built up to. Like, that was already. Now how they got there, maybe you could say like, maybe it was a little rushed, or oh wait, it's a little too far out, like, because we had like about 4 or 5 weeks away. But at the same time, that's still a story. Like, it's still something that they built up to, and it started the moment that Roman came back from at SummerSlam. Like, all this got together, and we kind of knew where it was going. That's a story. Like, no matter what, that's still a storyline, and that's still better than what they did with the women.
It is. Even for all the criticisms everybody's got about the men's War Games, you can't say that they didn't plan this out in advance.
It's true. But is it now at the point where it's becoming too predictable, where we can't really enjoy, or we're not going to enjoy the product?
No, I think you can know something's coming. Like every year we know, these main top guys that are not champion, they're gonna vie for the Royal
It's Rumble. More of your.
We know that every. We know that every year. We know every year we'll get guys like Brock Lesnar or a Rock or a John Cena around WrestleMania season, because WrestleMania is coming up. Just because we know something's coming up doesn't mean that you can't plan it out a little better than what they did with the women's War Games. They should have had Nia and Liv, unlike, even though they were going against each other, they should have had them teaming together in the build-up, because they love to do the can they coexist tag team partners anyway. Then why not you just have, instead of them going at each other and doing Liv versus Tiffany and all this other crap, how about you have them team up together against Jade and Bianca? It should have been Liv and Nia versus Jade and Bianca. Liv and Nia versus Bailey and Naomi. have them team up together. They could still be beefing with each other and feuding with each other heading into Crown Jewel, but at least there would have been that familiarity with them where we said, hey, we've seen them team up all these weeks, so it makes sense that after they're done fighting each other, they team up together for War Games. But they didn't do that.
They didn't. They didn't do that. That's the whole point of it all. They didn't make it work. They didn't invest most of their time into doing it. I think they just keep going like week by week instead of long. Like we have long-term booking, but when it comes to when it gets closer to like doing these monthly pay-per-view shows and events or live events, they wait till like a week or two before or a month before the event. Like you were so vested in Crown Jewel and that shit that you forgot about your next big PLE.
Yeah. So like, so like what I want to say earlier about taking enjoyment out because something's predictable. I think when it comes to that, it's more of personal preference. So like for me, like it still doesn't take the enjoyment out. It's just that because the way that I view wrestling, I view it in a different way, where it's like, you know, if something is good, I want to see like if it comes together, and if it's good, then it's entertaining to me, right? I'm at the age where it's like it's kind of hard for me to mark out to like certain things, like if somebody comes back or whatever the case may be. It's just hard for me just because like I view wrestling different. But there are still things like there's still those moments where I get like really excited about, and it's like, holy shit, they actually did that. Like when Danielson won the AEW title, I was like legit happy about that because I was like, holy shit, like they actually pulled the trigger. And you know, that was a great moment itself, like with his family there, like that was a fantastic moment. So there's certain things like when it comes to that, I think it's personal preference, because there are like, again, like there's people who hate dirt sheets. When dirt sheets leak out shit, oh, that takes out the enjoyment of wrestling. But I was like, at the end of the day, that's them doing their jobs. And I still love shit like that, because it's like, if you wanted to be like sports, or you wanted to be, that's part of the sport aspect of hearing rumors and things that are coming out. Hey, this person is a free agent. He might sign with this company. That shit to me makes it interesting. I like that spectrum of it. Like where there's real life shit that is like, holy shit, we don't know what's going on. That makes me more excited than like whatever they're doing on TV, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel you on that. But we'll talk more about the Women's War Games matchup as well as the setup for it after Raw coming up on Monday. That already was taped last Monday, where we'll get more development. Yeah. You want the spoiler?
Sure.
Okay, we'll give everybody the spoiler warning. Spoiler warning, everyone.
Blink,
So
blink.
pause it for 30 seconds and then press go live. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Brock Lesnar came back. No, I'm kidding. 1-0. The Women's War Games will feature the returning Rhea Ripley. Krssi Love.
Okay. She's back. So she okay.
And apparently she has a Rip Hamilton mask. The protective mask for her orbital bone.
Oh,
yeah, she did.
Okay.
Yeah, she did.
She got to wear the nose.
Somebody spoke. There was somebody that's not very. There's somebody in the wrestling community that a lot of people are not very fond of, and she posted a bunch of videos and a bunch of photos. So everyone basically put the blame on her about all the spoilers, which is not really her fault, but because she's very disliked. That's basically what happened. They put the blame on her because she put everything up.
But yeah, there you go. So you're gonna have some star power. We're gonna throw another storyline into the Women's War Games matchup. So there it is. But we'll talk more about War Games. We got 2 more weeks before Survivor Series War Games to talk about it.